Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bruin Dash, the UCLA show on Dash Sports TV. My name is Sam Connon. I'll be one of your hosts as always today, and I am joined once again by Jack Perez. Jack, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Sam. It's starting to heat up a little bit here in LA. I don't have to have two blankets every single time I go to sleep. It's feeling nice out here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's staying active, staying good. Weather's great. We love to see it. It's Southern California. It's LA. It is what it is. I'll take it. So we'll be talking UCLA men's basketball today. 3-game winning streak going now after wins against Arizona and Arizona State last week. It's a 74-60 win over Arizona on Thursday and an 80-79 close last-second win over Arizona State on Saturday. Both of those came at home. Both really interesting games. We're going to break those down. And then UCLA, they are now a number 9 seed in Joe Lunardi's from ESPN, his bracketology. We're going to be talking about that and the Pac-12 as a whole, what their postseason could look like, and kind of the hierarchy there. And then the upcoming slate for UCLA, they got road games against Utah and Colorado, but also a newly scheduled game against Oregon next Wednesday. We'll touch a little bit on that. So without further ado, let's get started. And if you have any live thoughts, please let us know. Or questions, comments, concerns, hot takes, leave them in the comments below and we'll get around to them. But for now, Jack, let's talk about these Arizona games. Let's start with the Arizona game as opposed to Arizona State. We'll get to that one in a little bit. But the Arizona game, a double-digit win in conference play. Haven't seen a lot of those for UCLA. It's mostly been close wins and some bad losses, but a good, solid win over a team with a winning record in conference play. What are your takeaways from that Arizona game on Jaime Jaquez's birthday?
Let's just talk about Mick Cronin owning Sean Miller. He's got him in his pocket. There's nothing that Sean Miller has been able to do against Mick Cronin so far in Cronin's UCLA tenure. I don't know what's wrong with this Arizona team. They look, 0-4. 0-4 so far. If they meet again in the Pac-12 tournament, expected to be 0-5. I don't know what's wrong with this Arizona team. This is a traditional powerhouse team, especially for the last 20-something years. They've looked like a competitive squad. Even when they're down, they don't look like a team that UCLA is usually able to beat. But for UCLA to defend their home court, which is something they've been able to do all season, even in that Arizona State game, it's huge. It's huge for a confidence boost. It's even bigger that they're able to sweep one of their rivals. Everyone talks about USC now, especially since the Trojans have risen. But for years, it's been UCLA, Arizona back and forth. And for UCLA to comprehensively beat them at home is a good confidence booster for games like Arizona State, where it is a little bit closer. You don't want to have, like we've said time and time again, they can't just have close game after close game after close game, because some of those are going to go the wrong way. You're not going to have a Jalen Clark free throw to win a game every time. Sometimes you're going to have an Oscar De Silva last second layup to lose a game. So getting this nice little break, this nice comfortable win. I say comfortable. It looked close for quite a while. They pulled away a little bit more later on, but to have a little bit at time at the end to really relax, say this is how we should be playing every single time, is a big boost for Cronin's team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to what you were starting with, the Cronin versus Sean Miller. I think this is Arizona's not a great team this year. They have talent, but they have the self-imposed ban and everything. They're not amazing, but still, maybe this is the wrong term, but it's a program-defining game for both teams. Arizona, it kind of, 4 straight losses to UCLA, 5 out of the last 6, I think it is. That's tough. Sean Miller hasn't won an NCAA tournament game since the sanctions from not the sanctions, but the reports from the FBI came out in 2017. They're really slipping, and UCLA, after losing a little bit of ground in the Steve Alford era, is kind of reestablishing itself at the top of the conference. It's not just picking on the Utahs and the Washingtons, who have been pretty iffy the last couple of years. They're beating Arizona. And even though Arizona is not great this year, it's still Arizona, and that's a great win, especially when you rattle off 4 in a row. So that's good for the program. When it comes to this team this season, we were talking about last week, we've been talking about it for multiple weeks. Jaime Jaquez needed to get going, and he did just that. He absolutely took over. Played 37 out of 40 minutes. That's nothing new. He's always ready for a marathon. But 25 points, 10 and 12 from the field, I mean, he was perfect from 2. I mean, you love to see it. Like we said, needs to work on his free throws. He was 4 or 7 in that game, so who knows? It could have been a 30-burger, maybe, but that's pretty great. That a 25-point game on your birthday out of Jaime Jaquez. He was shooting mid range. He was working the post, offensive rebound, second chance, whatever it was. He was taking over. And we've been talking about all season. UCLA doesn't need one guy who takes over every game. They're not a star-oriented team, but they are going to need guys who can step up and play on the big stage and really just show off their skill, show off their talent, and take over in these individual games. Jaime Jaquez did that against Arizona, and he doesn't have to do it every night, but he's going to have to show a little bit more of that in the future. And he proved that he can do it in the biggest scenarios, as he did against Arizona State, the buzzer beater last year. We know Jaime Jaquez is legit, and that 25-point game against Arizona just reinforced that.
Yeah, and I think that also reinforced the fact that Mick Cronin needs to recruit guys that have birthdays in January, February, March, because we've already had the Jules Bernard birthday game. We've had the Tiger Campbell birthday game. Now we've had the Jaime Jaquez birthday game. If you just get guys that are playing on their birthdays, they're going to go out and try a little bit harder, it seems like. I don't know what the secret formula is for UCLA, but that's a good start, apparently, for Mick Cronin's team. And I think
let's go March. Let's keep those birthdays in March.
Only in March. Only people born in March. But if we're
exactly
jump ahead to the Arizona State game, and just a special shout out to Jalen Clark, because I feel like most basketball players are able to hit free throws. They should be able to hit free throws. We've talked about UCLA's free throws struggles. They've actually a decent team usually, but there have been some games where they just look like they can't hit a free throw to save their lives. But to hit a game-winning free throw your first season, to beat an Arizona State team that, in all honesty, should have won that game. That was a bad game for UCLA overall, except for coming out of there with a win. That was probably one of the only upsides for UCLA. But to hit one of those 2 free throws to end the game, to ice it, that's huge for any freshman's confidence, especially for a guy who he's not been struggling to come off the bench, but he hasn't been getting the consistent minutes that we thought he might be able to get. You know, before Chris Smith went down, he was getting maybe a couple minutes a game. Once Chris Smith went down, he's been getting about 10 to 12, 15, maybe if he's lucky. Doing things like that, showing that you're able to not only get a good offensive rebound, but able to hit a free throw to ice the game, that's huge for anyone's confidence, much less a freshman's confidence.
Absolutely. The freshman getting game-winning hustle plays, that's the kind of thing that tournament teams have, that Final Four teams have. You need those contributions from the guys who aren't the stars, who come off the bench, who are, I don't want to say no names, but not the recognizable faces, the stars, the starters of this team. You need Jalen Clark to assert himself on the court when in the limited time he gets, and he did just that. So great for him. I will say, people have been saying that Arizona State deserved to win this game and that they outplayed UCLA the whole time. I mean, they're up by a couple points. They're up by 7.5, and they went up by 10 in the second half. But with 11 minutes left, it was a 3-point game, and it was mostly back and forth from there. UCLA played really good offense. They scored 80 points. That's great. Good for them. They just couldn't close the gap. So it was pretty tight back and forth basketball until the last 3 minutes when UCLA just took over. The defense really locked down. There was a turnover by Jules Bernard got blocked. It went down the other way. Arizona State got an and one dunk. That seemed like it was a momentum killer that kind of ended the comeback. But nope, UCLA put their head down. They hit free throws. 11 of their last 16 points came from the free throw line. And that's what we were talking about last week. Go to the hoop and go up strong. Don't go trying to draw the foul, because that's when you force bad shots. But go trying to put up a good shot inside the paint, and that's when you draw fouls. And when you draw fouls, you get free throws. They were 19 to 23. That's great. And it really worked in crunch time. The defense, the efficiency, the effectiveness down low, that's great. There's Cody Riley, Mac Etienne on both sides of the floor. You love to see it. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and Mick Cronin has said this time and time again that UCLA should not be winning by jump shooting. That's not their identity. You know, Johnny Juzang might be a jump shooter, but He's more effective when he drives to the rim, gets a foul. College guys aren't great shooting from the three-point line or from mid-range. It's just the truth. They're not as efficient as guys in the NBA. And even guys in the NBA will tell you it's more efficient to be closer to the rim. I mean, there's a reason that the mid-range game has pretty much died because it's just not efficient. It's not efficient basketball. And Mick Cronin understands that. And his team getting down low, getting to the rim, making – they're still tough shots, but they're easier shots than getting a contested three. And you're not usually going to get fouled on those contested threes. We did see Johnny Juzang get fouled on a three, make all 3 free throws. That's great, but that doesn't happen as often in the college game. Sometimes in the NBA, you see these guys getting fouled on threes all the time, but in college, they seem to be a little bit less adept at drawing those fouls. So getting down low, making those tough shots, making free throws, and even better, like I said already, Jalen Clark was able to get an offensive rebound because the shot before that came from about 2 feet away. So it was a short rebound. He got the rebound, immediately went up and got fouled. Doing things like that, doing the little things, fighting for the ball, fighting for those tough shots down low are going to win you basketball games. And that's what UCLA needs to continue to do if they want to get a good seed in March and play deep into the tournament.
Yeah, shot selection for one, that was a big improvement that we saw in both these games over the past weekend. Jaime Jaquez was taking open shots, taking whatever he got against Arizona. And then Arizona State, like you said, they were working in the paint. They were working the floaters. Tyger Campbell, Jules Burnett. The floater game was really strong. That's all I have to say. It looked really nice. It looked pretty, and it was effective too. That's the best kind of basketball you can play. I will say, though, usually this UCLA team and most teams in general in college basketball, when you allow over 70, when you allow 79 points, you're probably going to lose. That's what Mick Cronin will say. Like if you're in a press conference with Mick Cronin after the game, and let's say UCLA lost 71-68, he'll say, "Doesn't matter. You can't win games when you allow over 70 points." It's very simple for him. And last year was very simple. When you look at their win-loss record, when they allow more than 70 points, it's hard to do. And they haven't really done it a lot this year, again, because it's hard to do. But they won a game in regulation where they allowed 79 points. And so not great defense overall. Pretty poor defense in the first half. They were on pace to allow 82. Remy Martin, Alonzo Verge were going off. Holland Woods was going off from 3. Kenny Lawrence was really being strong and effective down low. So you wouldn't really say it was a good defensive game for UCLA until the last 3 minutes when Arizona State didn't score a point, which is awesome. They didn't go to the free throw line. They didn't hit a field goal, whatever it was. UCLA locked down. That's what this team needs to do. And they've proven they can do it. They proved it last year. They proved it this year. That working defensively in crunch time as hard as they can and fighting through the adversity for these wins when their offense isn't playing great or the defense had 35 minutes of poor play. Just locking down and putting together 5 amazing defensive minutes against a really good offensive team that's really talented. That's how they won this game. They won this game with defense despite overall a bad defensive game.
Yeah, but the key now for the Bruins is translating that over a full game because come later in the season, come against teams like Oregon, against teams like USC, you can't be lax for 35 minutes of the game, expect to still be in it with 5 minutes left. The defense doesn't have to take a night off. There's some nights where Johnny Juzang's going to go cold from three-point line. There's nights where Jaime Jaquez is not going to be able to get his shots up. There's nights where Tyger Campbell's floaters aren't going to fall every single time. That's going to happen. But defense doesn't have to quit. And that's what Mick Cronin's really trying to instill in this team. That's what Mick Cronin's always instilled, even way back in his Cincinnati days. His defenses were always the ones to carry that team. And UCLA has to translate that over into these next few games. It's going to be tough. They haven't been a great defensive team all year. They haven't really shown that they're able to do it consistently for 10, 15 minutes and a half, much less a full game, but they're getting there. And if you see their potential, and Mick Cronin has seen their potential, and he's able to really draw that out of them time and time again. Every time the other team brings the ball down the court, getting set, getting all their communication correct, and just really locking in, this UCLA team is scary on the defensive end. They just haven't been able to show it often.
Yeah, absolutely. Consistency on both sides of the floor is something this team needs to work on and will have to work on into the postseason. And with that, let's start talking about the postseason with Pac-12 tournament, NCAA tournament. UCLA, like I said earlier, is currently a 9 seed in Joe Lunardi's bracketology. There are a couple Pac-12 teams in there. Stanford's on the first 4 out right now, so they're not currently in. But with them included, that's 5 Pac-12 teams that are really contending for a spot in March Madness. It's UCLA, Oregon, Colorado, USC, and Stanford. So, Jack, I'm going to ask you, how far can UCLA go in the Pac-12 and NCAA tournaments? And is there anything, whether it's their fault or a narrative or anything, that's kind of holding them back right now?
Well, the narrative is always the West Coast bias. Everyone in the NCAA, in football, men's basketball, whatever you want to say, they have this bias against the Pac-12, and that's going to happen. It's been tough to shake off. Football, the Pac-12 just hasn't performed very often. You've had a couple of good seasons from Oregon, from Washington recently, but it hasn't been anything spectacular. And when they get to playing teams like Alabama, they're getting blown out of the water, and it doesn't seem like they're really up to snuff. And with basketball, I don't know why that's still there. I mean, yes, USC lost to UConn early this season. UCLA had losses against San Diego State and Ohio State. But the San Diego State game, you had Jalen Hill out. In the Ohio State game, it was very close and in Ohio, and they thought they were playing Kentucky until just a few days before. So you can't. Well, they are losses, and you still have to hold them against them as losses. They're not a 9 seed. They are more like a 7 seed in a typical year. If for the Pac-12 tournament, they could win the whole thing. The only team that looks really consistently better than them is USC, and we'll see in a little bit over a week's time how they match up against that USC team and whether the narrative has changed. And if UCLA comes out with a win on that one, they are looking good for a number 1 seed in the Pac-12 tournament. They're already looking at a bye there. They should be good to go. They should be roaring into Vegas. When it comes to the NCAA tournament, it's all going to be about their seeding. If they're an 8 or 9 seed, I have a hard time seeing them get past that round of 32. I don't see how they get past a Baylor, a Gonzaga, a Michigan, any team like that. If they're put at a 7, though, that's pretty rough for any 2 seed to face. I don't know, Sam. How far do you think they can go? Because you were talking about them possibly being a Sweet 16 team just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so I'll start off with the Pac-12. I'm with you. I think they can win it all. I don't want to say they're the favorite. I mean, the betting odds came out. They have the second best odds behind USC. That's fair. USC is the most talented and has the best resume in the Pac-12 so far this year. So good for them. They should be favored to win the Pac-12 tournament. Unless they lose to UCLA at Pauley Pavilion next week, they'll probably win the regular season too. So I have no problem with people favoring USC over UCLA in the Pac-12 tournament, but I think those are the 2 top contenders. When it comes to the NCAA, I mean, Lunardi puts them at a 9, and off the top of my head, having watched this team every game all season, I say that's too low. That's unfair. It's the East Coast bias, whatever it is. Then I start looking. UCLA in the KenPom, 45 overall. In the net ranking, they're 41 overall. In BPI, they're 42 overall. They're 43, excuse me. So, I mean, that puts them in that range. The only thing is, I've come to the realization that all of those rankings are absolute garbage. They mean nothing. They're stupid, and I don't care about them at all. I mean, UCLA before USC. I mean, they have a game in hand. They played an extra game, and they won it earlier this week against Oregon. UCLA and USC were tied atop the Pac-12 in the conference standings. So, and USC was a 4 or 5 seed, whatever it was, and UCLA was 9. Well, okay, well then USC must have played really well out of the conference. I mean, they had 1 loss. It was to UConn, who's not really a great team. UCLA had 2 losses, but they were to San Diego State, who's in the top 25 right now, and Ohio State is in the top 5. Or they're probably a top 5 team in the country. So I don't understand. I agree. USC completely handled UCLA earlier this year. Granted, it was without Jalen Hill, Cody Riley, unexpectedly. So a little iffy. We'll see how it goes when they have a rematch next week. But USC is the better team. I'm not saying that UCLA and USC should be equal when it comes to seeding. But I just don't understand how these rankings have USC in the teens and UCLA all the way down in the 40s. All of these rankings have UCLA barely as a top 50 team. Well, if you have watched this team over the course of the season, or if you look at their schedule, their results, their resume, they're not in the 40s. This is a top 30 team. I feel like that's not too much to ask. It's not too much to ask for UCLA to be a 6 or 7 seed. You have Duke, who's been absolute garbage all season long, and they put together 2-3 wins in a row, and now they're on the bubble. They had a losing record through most of January. They hadn't beat a team over 500 until February, pretty much. Yet Duke gets the benefit of the doubt. And when it comes to bracketology, when it comes to all these rankings, that's garbage. That's stupid. I don't care about any of this. The thing is, the bracketology is usually a pretty good prediction. If the season ended today, Lenardi's probably right. I would say that UCLA ends up being a 9 seed. I strongly disagree with that because all the rankings that put them as a 9 seed are stupid, and I hate them. So it is what it is. I don't get it. I hate these stupid analytic college basketball, whatever. They're valuable for little individual things, but don't make them everything. It doesn't tell anywhere close to the full story. I'm not here for it. Just BPI. We've talked about FPI in the past when we were talking about UCLA football and how a losing record Penn State was ahead of all these Pac-12 teams like USC when they were undefeated. UCLA is 16-5. They're 43rd. You have a 12-9 Rutgers team that's 37. What? A 12-10 Indiana team that's 32. Come on, where does this come from? I hate it all. It's nonsense. I don't care. We'll see how it goes. But UCLA, I still think could be a Sweet 16 team if they get the right seeding. If they're an 8 or 9, I think they lose to a 1. I don't have confidence there, but they shouldn't be there to begin with.
I guess I'll be the level-headed one on this one. It's because there's not a lot of out-of-conference play this season. We played the Ohio State still. We played a couple of small teams in Seattle and San Diego. We played San Diego State.
It's a good win.
We played beat Marquette at home, but there's not been enough of that to really generate more accurate rankings. As we've seen in the past years, net is a little wonky at times. They're a little bit too volatile at times. And then, AP and coaches polls, they rely a lot on history. These teams like a Duke, like a Kansas, like a Kentucky, they took too long to drop out of these rankings because they still believe in those teams. They still see that they got a high number of high recruits. They see that they have a lot of potential, but they're not actually translating to wins. Things like that hurt UCLA because UCLA hasn't been a traditional power in the past few years. Other than that Lonzo year, it hasn't been the same UCLA team that probably, honestly, got that same benefit of the doubt in the 2000s and in the 90s when there were years that they were really good. They were national champions. They were Final Four contenders for a lot of that time. But there were also years where they honestly weren't that good and they were ranked for way too long at that time. That's what's happening is they're delving too much into history rather than what's actually happening right now. What's actually happening right now.
But I disagree there because USC is ranked in the teens right now. Because when it's AP college or the bracketology or all these other rankings, USC is beat UCLA. I get it. They should be ranked ahead of UCLA. But up until Tuesday or Monday, whenever they played Oregon, they had the same record in the same conference. UCLA had 2 non-conference losses to Ohio State, top 5 team, San Diego State, top 25 team. They beat Marquette, a solid win. Let's look at USC's non-conference schedule. Cal Baptist, they beat them in overtime. Okay, UCLA beat Pepperdine in overtime, so pretty even there. They beat Montana. They beat BYU. Okay, that's a good win. They lost to UConn. They beat UC Irvine. They beat Santa Clara, and that's it. Where is this thing that sets USC so high above UCLA? And I'm not even saying this to discredit USC. USC should be a 5 seed or 4 seed, whatever they are right now. They're a really good team. But why is UCLA so far behind when they are the power? They are the powerhouse who should get the benefit of the doubt. The AP poll has them at 32 right now? That's reasonable. Don't put them in the mid-40s. That's disrespectful.
2 words, Mobley brothers. When you've got the potential,
Yeah.
when you've got a potential number one pick on your team, everyone sees you as much better than you are. Oklahoma State looks so good right now because everyone is in love with Cade Cunningham, and he's a great player. But that Oklahoma State team is not as good as it seems to be. When Ben Simmons was on LSU a few years ago, they didn't make the NCAA tournament, but people only had them even contention for it because of how good Ben Simmons was. That wasn't a very good team. This happens a lot where you have guys that are really highly ranked. Whereas, who is that guy for UCLA? Jaime Hawkins Jr., great player. Tiger Campbell, great player. Cody Riley, great player. All great players, but they're not guys that are competing for the Wooden Award. They're not guys that are, competing to be a lottery pick right now. UCLA had that in Chris Smith and a guy that was potentially fighting for a lottery pick to potentially be a possible Wooden finalist. I don't know how far he would have gone there. He was looking a little shaky in part of the season, looking really good in other parts. But UCLA doesn't have a guy like that, and that's really holding them back right now in this bracketology. I'm not saying it's fair, but I'm just saying that's usually the reality of these situations.
Yeah, and it's a harsh reality. It's a sad, stupid reality, in my opinion. It doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't get it. So I've ranted long enough about that. Let's move on to our last segment of the day. We'll try to wrap this up quickly. But UCLA playing the Mountain Schools on the road this weekend. They got Utah on Thursday at 5 p.m. and Colorado Saturday at 7 p.m. So UCLA beat both those teams last time around when they came to Pauley at the very beginning of conference play. Chris Smith tore his ACL against Utah. Jalen Hill was there for both those games, so it's a little bit different of a dynamic here. Jack, what do you expect to see out of these two big road games this week?
UCLA really needs a big win against either one of these teams. They can't have close games against these two teams. Against Utah, Chris Smith tore his ACL and had hurt his. It looked like he had hurt his knee possibly at the end of the first half. He came out of the second half a little rusty, but was able to come back to the game. And then against Colorado, McKinley Wright was good, but he wasn't a world beater that night in Pauley Pavilion. But they're going up to Salt Lake City. They're going up to Boulder. Those are going to be tough games. UCLA needs, probably against Utah, to wipe the floor with them. That is going to be a huge thing they need before they have to go up to Eugene and then back to LA to face USC. Is they need a huge win to kind of motivate them. But more importantly than a huge win is they need to go 2-0. Just anything to keep them alive, even if they have setbacks against USC and Oregon, they need these wins to really cement their place in the NCAA tournament. They're pretty solid right now. They should be in, but beating a Colorado team that, while I don't know if Colorado is better or not, they've been consistently ranked a little bit better. They've been seen as a little bit better, even though UCLA already beat them earlier this year. And that might ruffle some feathers up in Boulder, but UCLA is a better team than Colorado is. Colorado has the best player on the floor, but UCLA is the better team, and UCLA needs to come out with that win.
Yeah, I think UCLA needs to beat Utah. I mean, they have a losing record in conference play. They already dropped a game to Washington State, and that did not do them any favors in terms of perception, in terms of the standings, whatever. A Utah loss would be in that same class where it's not maybe the bottom of the barrel of the conference this year. Then Utah has pretty good players. But they have to win that game. And then Colorado, we kind of predict this almost every week now. That's going to be the Mac Etienne game. And Cody Riley will start, and he'll, as long as he's not in foul trouble, which he usually is, he'll be the main focus down low for UCLA. But with Batty and the bigs that Colorado has, they run a very physical, big-oriented offense with McKinley Wright running point and kind of running the show up there. But UCLA needs their bigs to show up. Without Jalen Hill, probably, Mac Etienne needs to show up. I don't really trust Kenny Nwuba at this point. He plays a couple minutes here or there. He had a couple of decent plays the last weekend. But really, when Cody Riley's not on the floor, it's got to be Mac Etienne, and he's got to show up big time against Colorado. And like you said, 2-0 this weekend. That's all I need. If you win out, if you go 4-0 down the stretch, you're Pac-12 regular season champions. You're the one seed in the tournament. That's great. And if you drop one, then still not at the so you go 3-0 in that games, Utah, Colorado, and then you got to take care of business to USC. So it's hard to go defeated down the stretch. To be a especially when 3 of those in a row are on. But tie sticks, they have to do it 2-0 this weekend and reevaluate before they face Oregon next week.
Yeah, and honestly, that's going to be the tougher week. The at Oregon and then coming home to face USC. That's a bloodbath right there. And if UCLA doesn't survive that, it's looking bad going into the Pac-12 tournament. That hopefully they make the finals of. But if they don't, then that's a rough week for UCLA. Oh, looks like we might have lost Sam for a bit, but we will wrap up the show there. I don't know where Sam went. Unfortunately, it looks like he might have lost connection for a little bit. Thank you all. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Oh, Sam, are you back? Maybe.
All right, I'm back. Did I lag out, Jack?
You lagged out for just a bit. It's okay.
All right. So I don't know. You got any last thoughts on the games this weekend?
I mean, UCLA just needs wins. That's all you have to do. Just win. Every single time out, as long as you come out with more points than the other team, UCLA is in a good spot.
It's a simple equation. We love to hear it. That kind of coach talk, that press conference talk. You've been trained well, Jack. So congrats. That's going to be it for this week's episode of Bruin Dash. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching live, if you're watching the replay on Twitter, YouTube, thanks for joining us as well. We've been kind of going back and forth with times here, but usually we'll be on Monday nights. So you can tune back in to hear our thoughts on the Mountain School games and what lies ahead for UCLA after that. So if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can follow us at Dash Sports TV. You can follow me at Sam Connon. You can follow Jack at Jack C. Perez. So that's how you can follow all of us. Jack, do you have anything to say? A little sign off here today?
Just great to be here with you, Sam. As always, love hanging out with you and talking UCLA basketball.
I love it too. Good to hear it. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week, and bye-bye.